I want to create a flower, so what I'll do first is go to my front view and create a sphere. Alright, and then in Modify I would reduce these segments because I'm gonna be duplicating that sphere. I will add FFD 2x2x2 and I will grab the control points and push them out like this, and also I will select them from the left view and scale them down. So now this is what I have, but I still have the pivot point of the sphere down here. I'm gonna assign a material for the petal, and let's say it's gonna be yellowish. I'm also gonna add a bend modifier and change the direction so that I can bend the petal up and down if I wanted to. Alright, let's now make duplicates of this. I'm gonna use the array tool, tools array, preview, and I'm gonna choose a total of, so I click here, rotation total 360 degrees. So whatever count here is going to be divided into 360 degrees. So if I had 1, I'm just going to have 360 degrees. If I had 2, each one of them will have 180 degrees. If I had 4, the angle between every 2 would be 90 degrees, and so forth. So you can do this interactively like this, and make sure that there are instances of each other, which means that if I change the angle for 1, all of them will change at the same time. Alright, so let's now create the central part, sphere, snap, put it here. Alright, that's what I have. If I want to cut it from below, I would increase the hemisphere value, and there you go. I'm gonna give it a material. I'm gonna choose gradient ramp, and I'll set the gradient type to radial and increase the tiling. And here I will change the colors. So the central one, for each of those dots I'll make it red, and then darker red, and then really dark red. So that's what I would get. I can also add an FFD for this and move these down. Alright, I'm gonna add the stem now. Let's grab the whole thing and move it up. For the stem, it's gonna be a simple line. I'll choose it smooth. Alright, and then I will make sure that it's actually good in all views. So I don't want it to be totally straight in one view. So curvature in all views. Alright, so I'm gonna enable and increase the thickness like this, and also I'll give this a color green material. Let's now animate the petals. So I'm gonna select, I'll make sure that my interpolation is set to auto, which is here. I'll go to frame, let's say 40, and change the angle. If I wanted to use set key, I would have to check modifiers. I didn't use set key, so it's okay. and then it's gonna go up, and then I'm gonna copy this keyframe and place it here. So if I play the animation, alright, I can go to the curve editor and fix if there's anything I don't like about it. So for example, this one here, I can bring it like that. I can give this more time to stay, and I'm actually gonna make this continuous, so it's gonna start like this. So whenever this one finishes, it's gonna continue going down. I can press here if I like to make sure that it's perfectly continuous. Alright, and then I can go back to normal. So now I know that the animation of this is gonna be continuous. It's never gonna break at the end. Alright, but this happens in case there is a lot of wind. So let's select the whole thing now and add another bend modifier, and also take the center and place it down at 0. So the center should be down here because I need to bend the flower properly, otherwise it would bend from the center. So auto key and just bend it over. And also go to the curve editor and make sure that it's good. So that's the bend that I'm after. Angle. It's not bad. Let's see. What I don't like about it is that it's stopping. So I can again grab the keyframes, the tangents, and make them continuous. So it will be a continuous flow from one loop to the other, right? So it will not stop and then continue. That way it looks more natural. Alright, so that's it for the flower. Let's add some rain. Of course I would need ground. For the ground I'm gonna add a plane and I'm gonna give it segments, let's say 60 by 60, and I'm gonna add a noise modifier. The noise modifier will deform randomly in a given direction. In this case we want the Z direction to be the direction of the deformation, so we increase the Z strength down here, and we also increase the scale. And I'm also gonna check fractal and play with the scale a bit more, so that now looks more like soil than what I had before. Of course I can increase the size of the plane. Alright, and let's press Ctrl C for a camera view. For the plane I'm just gonna add a material, let's call it soil. Go down to maps, diffuse color bitmap, I'm gonna select this image here, which I fixed in Photoshop. So I downloaded this image, alright, but you see that I can't really use that, so I took it to Photoshop. I took out this part and I made the edges tileable so that if it tiles I don't see an edge. So if you look here, this will continue over there and so forth. So I made it tileable, and now I can use that over my terrain. So I'm gonna press P to go back to perspective. You see it's not tiling now because I just have one tile. I set it to 4 by 4. It tiles without any seams. Right, so if I look from the camera view and render this, that's what I would get. Maybe 4 by 4 is too little. I'm gonna try 6 by 6. Another thing I'm gonna do is drag this down to the bump channel, instance this, and see what I get with bump. You see, bump will create roughness for the surface, so you can increase that value to add to the roughness. Another thing I can do is drag this to the specular level to create shininess for this. So now, because I want it to be wet from the rain, so now it looks wet down here compared to now. And I'm also going to bring it down to the glossiness. And I'm going to increase the Z strength. Alright, and let's see. That's the wetness I'm after, but it doesn't really show until you add lights, which I didn't do yet. So once I add lights and render, I'm gonna see the surface becoming wet, and this depends on the position of the light. So if I place the light here, that wetness is gonna go with the light. You see that? So that's what I did here. Let's see if I can get a better look. No, it was better before. So I'm gonna go like this, and I'll make the specular color perfectly white. Alright, so now you see the actual bump having more of an effect because of what I did with the material and the lights. But we're gonna add the lights a bit later. Alright, so I'll delete the light now, and I'm gonna work on the rain. So I'm gonna go to create and choose particle systems and choose spray for rain, and I'll move it up here. If I press play, I'm gonna start to have rain falling down. Now I can't really see it because it's not reaching that far down, so I'm gonna lower it down. But I shouldn't really see the emitter, so I'll just keep it above the camera. I'll go to modify and increase the speed, say to 200 or 300, and increase the count 2000 by 2000. 2000 is the viewport count, and the other one is for the render count. And I'll rotate it a little bit just to give it an angle. And I want to remove the uniformity, so I'm going to increase the variation here, and that will make them more natural. And now it makes sense why the flower is actually blowing like this, because there's rain and wind. Now they're starting at 0, so at 0 I have no rain, and then they start. Because the start time is 0, I'm going to set the start time to negative something, like negative 30 or negative 50, and then I will get rain all the way through. All throughout the animation I will have rain. Alright, let's save the file at this stage. And let's add an environment. So rendering, environment, I'll add a gradient, and I'll edit the gradient in the material editor. I will choose spherical environment so that the environment would wrap around the scene and not be just an image in the background. I'm gonna have dark blue colors here because it's raining, and so let's see. Now whenever we did that, we saw that the rain particles are too chunky. So the first thing I'll do is decrease the drop size, say to 1.5, and I'll make it render as a facing polygon. Right? Whenever I do this, that's the facing polygon. It's just a square facing the camera. Right? I want to give it a material now, so rain, and set my diffuse color to something bright because it's close to white really. Okay, I see it, but rain falls down in a streak. It's a streaky appearance. It's not a dot that goes like this because of the speed of the particle. So what I need to do is give it something called motion blur. Let's increase the size back to 2 and increase the count, say, to 5,000 in the rendering. And I want these to streak down. So I right click, object properties. Where I have motion blur, I'll choose object motion blur. So now, depending on the speed of every particle, you're gonna have the rain particle streak. Now it's not very obvious now, so I'm gonna increase the self illumination so that it renders better. I can also increase the drop size. Now you shouldn't really see it very clearly, but when you render the animation, it would be clear. Alright, so what I did to create the streaky effect is activate motion blur. I increased the drop size, which is the size of the particle, and I increased the count. I want the this color to be a bit darker, the color here. And now I'm going to add some lights before I do the final rendering. So I'm going to create an Omni Light here. The Omni Light is a light that shines in all directions, but I want to have even lighting all throughout. So I'm going to make the light, but I'm going to decrease its multiplier, which is the intensity of the light, because I'm going to have many lights like these. So I'm going to say 0.1. And I'll make an instance because I need to modify all the lights at once. And then in the top view, I'll make another set of instances and another. So now I have 4, and then I would have 8. Why am I doing this? Because now I'm going to have lighting all throughout. So far it's dim. So I'm going to select all my lights. I'll press H. I can select the omnis from here, or I can type. Yeah, but I want to make more copies, so I'll go like this, and alright, let's say 0.05 instead of 0.1, so half the intensity, because I still want to have one main light, which is the sunlight, but the sunlight is not very strong because it's raining, but I'm gonna have something. Okay, so I have light from the top but no light from the bottom, so I'll select these and actually copy them downwards. I'll choose copy for these because these, they are instances for each other, but they're not instances of these, because I might change their multiplier, make it darker from the bottom, but not as dark as before. So I'll choose 0.03 for these. So it would be darker from below, but not as dark as I had before. Alright, and now I'm going to add my main light, which is going to be something called the target direct light that goes down like this. It's too small, so it doesn't cover the whole area. So I'll go to Modify, Directional Parameters, and I'll make it larger so that it covers the whole area. And I'll specify its direction from where it's coming by moving the light. And I give it shadows, and the multiplier should be something like 0.4. Let's see. Alright. The last thing I want to do is change the color of these lights to bluish so that they are more in coherence with the environment. Bluish. And I also want to decrease the size of the particles, the drop size, from 3 say to 1.5, even though they wouldn't be visible now, but when I render the animation they would look much better. And also I would increase their number, so from 5,000 to 15,000. It might take some time to render on slower machines, but it would render much better. It would be also nice to add a puddle of water somewhere. So I would create a plane. Alright, and just lower it down so that we have puddles. Because remember, this plane here, this one is going up and down. But this one, the new one, it's perfectly horizontal. So it's gonna fit through the openings of the other one. So I'll call this water puddle. And I will give it a material. So I'll choose Ray Trace, assign the material. The color is black, but the transparency color is something like this, dark blue, because I want it to be a bit transparent. I'll give it Fresnel reflection, bump, I'll give it noise, say 30. Let's render. Now it is going to take more time to render because of the ray tracing and the number of particles. Alright, now I want the puddle to come here also, although it would take longer to render. First though, I'm gonna decrease the bump, say to 15, the strength, and increase the size to 50. I'll select this one and I'll change the seed. Whenever I change the seed, the form will change. The form of the deformation will change. So I have water down here now because of the new seed that I chose. Let's render. It would be a good thing to increase the segments for this. So I go down to plane and say 150 by 150. Even more, 300 by 300. Okay, so that it looks smoother. Alright, and one last thing I might add is fog. So I'm going to select my camera because I want to add the fog because I don't want to see the end here so sharp. So I'm gonna select my camera and go to environment ranges and show the end range and increase the near and the far range. Now what these do, beyond the far range, which is this here, this value, I would have complete fog, so everything will be invisible except for the fog. Now the near range, that's the near range, the value that I'm increasing now. Before the near range you have no fog, but after it you start to increase the fog until it becomes the maximum at the far range. So I don't want the flower to be too fogged, so I put the near range right behind the flower. So to add fog, I will go to rendering and environment, add fog, and I want the color of the fog to be the same as the background. So I'll copy the gradient from here and paste it there, and let's see now what happens if you render. You're gonna see that we're gonna have a smooth disappearance of this part and gradually showing the landscape. So this will create much more believability to the effect that you're after. Alright, and these dots are coming from the motion blur, but they will disappear once we render the animation. The final thing I want to do before I do the final render is animate the water noise. So auto key, choose linear, go to frame 100 and change the phase to something like 6. Alright, save the file and I render, and this is how I create this effect.